Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Dean, we have a returning guest on the pod today.
Yes, we do.
And that's not uncommon for us to do that.
No.
But we have a 3-year gap on
what?
this one.
Oh,
This is
really?
the last time that Justin Griffith
Was it 3 years ago?
StayLinked's appeared on
We're
the
starting
pod.
to date ourselves already like this? Okay.
Yes.
3 years ago. Oof.
We've been doing this long enough that we can go back. We can go back 4 years.
Yes, we could.
And find some old guests
Nice.
out there. Maybe I'll do that at some point. We're just trying to bring in some
So
long-term.
can
old
we consider
guests
him
and-
OG then?
Sure,
is
yeah.
that- okay.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, think about this. 2021.
Yeah.
We were mid-pandemic still.
Completely different situation.
It was, you and me and Marco were in our little bubble, I think we were starting to
So
get
we
a
had the
little bit
glass
more at
shield
that time.
behind-
We still had the glass shield
Okay.
going.
All right. Yeah,
I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
that on the last video. So, yes, we were still pretending like that was going to save us.
That was saving us, yes.
But we're getting back into a discussion about warehousing and supply chain again, because we talked about warehouse innovation with them last time, and the whole reticence that warehouses have about moving forward with technology and getting on board with new stuff, because it's kind of hard to just stop a warehouse operation and
This is true.
update and innovate necessarily. So we know a lot has changed since then, though. So we figured, hey, we should revisit this topic and get back into this again. So we're going to be talking about that evolution since then, what's changed in the years since.
Yep.
Is there still that reticence to adopt new technology? We're talking about AI, because
Everybody does.
I don't think we're allowed to have a
you got to.
podcast.
You can't. Yeah,
we're not
you
allowed to
can't
have a
not,
podcast without talking about AI
That's
at this
right.
point.
That's
It's just part of the gig.
We got to figure it out.
We're going to explain where that fits into this whole thing.
Okay.
And we're going to get into some other emerging supply chain technologies, get his read
Yes.
on some of the other stuff that is new or upcoming. Where are we now?
Got it.
So, lots of good stuff to get
I like
back
it.
into and revisit and
Yeah,
follow
yeah,
up
yeah.
on that conversation. There's always, I always will link stuff in the show notes usually. I'll link his old episode if you really want to go back and watch that one first. Maybe
Really good
come
stuff,
back.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not like a TV miniseries where you have
There's
to
a
watch
reason
the
why
first
he's back.
installment, but
There's a
You
reason
gotta
why he's
build
back.
up to it.
exactly. So, so all that plus our usual value to the VAR. What's TEConnecting with us? It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, our returning guest, Justin Griffith. He is the CTO of StayLinked. And I'm gonna preface this by pointing out part of the reason we brought him back on is Justin, I happened to see him on LinkedIn one day showing off wearing an Apple Vision Pro, which we've talked about on the pod before. Our sort of skepticism about this product.
We need to take on that. Go ahead. Yes.
He was showing off, trying it out, and talking about it, which I appreciated. Someone give us their personal insight on it. You even were showing off you doing some StayLinkt stuff, some terminal emulation from the Pro.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? We had Justin on. He was a very tech-savvy guy. He's clearly into the future of tech.
Clearly,
willing to be a first adopter and play around with this stuff. We need to bring him back.
I would
on
call
and
that
start
guinea
having these
pig. Like he was willing to make himself a guinea pig
Yeah.
in the technology.
Yeah, exactly. So, Justin, welcome back. Thanks for coming back on the show. Tell us a little about that. Give us maybe a little more insight into the Vision Pro. Like, why did you want to play around with it? And do you honestly see this as something that's beneficial and useful?
Totally. Yeah. I think it's so early. It is so early, in the tech cycle, and these all go through sort of the same adoption cycle. It's all a very predictable cycle for a lot of technologies where, if you look back over all of the emerging technologies, they're all gonna revolutionize the world. They're all gonna completely take over and change how we do everything. And over a long enough timeline, sometimes that's true, right? But I started playing with the Apple Vision Pro because it's one of the best executed versions of spatial computing, where you actually get to walk around and the world in front of you is your computer, and it's phenomenal. It is definitely one of the most impactful technology experiences I ever had. But I don't know if you remember when the iPad first came out.
Sure.
And it, the dynamic was kind of like, it's like a big iPhone, And so even the apps, they were sort of bridging the gap by taking all of the iPhone apps and letting you run them double-sized on the iPad. And it took a while before people found legit use cases where, okay, you need an iPad for this, not just a big iPhone. That's where the Apple Vision Pro is right now. And spatial computing as a whole, it's so new that people are still uncovering all the possibilities you could use that for. So it's great right now. It's brilliant for watching movies right now.
Is it full screen when you do that?
It's weird because you can roll a dial.
Oh, and make the size of the screen. Got it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not just that. You roll a dial, and that's the immersion level. So you can say, I want to be in space, and space will stop at 180 degrees of your vision. So you're in space in front of you, and then you look over and you start to be in your office. Or you can roll that dial and you're all of a sudden all in space, and then it pushes the screen out away from the moon and you're watching a movie while on the moon. So that's a unique experience. That's a very unique technological experience, but I don't know how productive I've been with it. I'll just put it that way.
Well, but to your point, if there are iPhone apps made for an iPhone now on this full heads up, VR, it's just they're just
not making this.
It's not there yet, right? It's not there.
Right. Yeah, but that actually, it's one of the other things. The eye tracking is the best I've ever seen. And so most people have never tried that before, where you're moving around the computer with your eyes. So that demo that I did with our software, I'm selecting menu options with my eyes and just tapping to navigate the app. And then you can reach out and touch it as if it's in the real world. And that's a very unique thing. But it is funny because you go to type and you have to very intentionally look at the letter and then click it, and then very intentionally look at the next letter. And most people go to check what they've typed, and you click, and now you're all over.
Oh, that's like texting with a QWERTY. You have to really get good at that. Remember?
Yes.
You used to be an expert at that.
The T9 thing, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, T9. Yeah.
T9. Yeah, I got to the point where I could T9
without even looking at it. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, just
now probably if you hand me one of those phones now, I'd probably be like, no, I can't do this.
Here's
too much.
Here's the other thing, Justin. I couldn't not to dwell on this, but it's aesthetically, right? I mean, so you're wearing ski goggles, and there's really only an appropriate place to wear ski goggles, which is on the slopes. So it's outside of that environment, you're going to look kind of awkward.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can wear it anywhere if you're brave enough.
Well,
sure.
You could. Yeah. Have you seen anybody out in the wild, not on a ski slope, wearing them? Yeah. Okay.
Other than me? No, absolutely not. Yeah.
I was going to say, he's out in California, so there's more likelihood of people doing it.
Yeah, I get away with the eccentric CTO look. I can wear, whatever piece is.
So you're not in the self-driving car wearing it just yet. That people have now cracked down on already.
But do you see the application in a warehouse, though? Because I know you guys get into...
Not for a long time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, because it's just, these fall down for kind of practical reasons, and it's sort of the same conversation that we had in the consumer device versus rugged device conversation that happened a number of years ago. And it was, no replaceable battery. The rugged, factor was huge. And that the conversation used to go, okay, well, I could buy 10 of these consumer grade devices before I get to the price of one of these rugged devices. And then people were like, yeah, but you will buy 10 of these before you go through one of the rugged devices, right? And so, we've got a very practical problem with spatial computing and AR, in that a number of the platforms, they cover your eyes. And so when you unplug it, you're blind, right? And that's not going to work from a safety, even the least paranoid safety manager is not going to let that on the floor, right? So for training, in a classroom setting, for very particular applications, like remote expert kind of applications and stuff, it'll probably fly for that, but it's going to have to be a lot more rugged and a lot more fault tolerant, I think, before we see it in the warehouse.
Okay.
That's fair.
Makes
there
sense.
You go. See?
Well, I'm glad you made the iPad analogy, because I remember my wife and I both got iPads around the same time. This was early 2010s, I guess. And we both got them just like given to us for our work where we were both working at the time, actually, like for various reasons, like, won them or got them handed to us for some reason. And honestly, neither one of us knew what to do with them for a while.
Yeah.
So one of those things we both were just like, all right, well, I can get my email on this.
Right.
And it wasn't until that proliferation of apps and like we started getting into like gaming on them a little more. And now it's our home computer essentially. You know, we don't have, other than our work computers, we don't have personal computers at home anymore. We use our iPad if we want to do that kind of stuff. So, all right, maybe that makes me feel a little better about the Vision Pro technology. Maybe it's, there's just not enough to do with it yet, and we'll get there. But thanks for making the segue there with the supply chain. The warehouse
you're
part of
welcome.
things, because that is actually what we're here to talk about. I would love to spend. I'd love to spend this entire conversation talking about cool new tech and what Justin's been playing with, because he gets his hands on more stuff I think than we do. But let's get into the supply chain here. Let's talk about where things have evolved. Like I mentioned, you were on 3 years ago. We were still, figuring out COVID. Supply chain was an absolute wreck at the time.
Yep.
We were still wondering, like, am I going to be able to get the stuff I need and on time?
Yeah.
But, a big part of that conversation, obviously, was the whole idea of resistance to upgrading technology and, why all these warehouses and supply chain, distributors, why they're so like, hey, it's hard for us to make these moves because what's, we don't want to fix what isn't broken. It's hard to, make transitions, hard to stop what we're doing to move where we need to go. Everyone's been trained on this stuff. But obviously, again, a lot has changed since then. And we've, there's been a huge evolution in technology in just these last 3 years. So has that attitude changed, Justin? Are people talking differently about it now? Are they a little more inclined to make the moves? Or are we still kind of stuck in the nope, not doing it kind of mode?
Well, the stakes haven't changed, right? So, and this has always been sort of my contention about the supply chain industry as a whole, is that if COVID proved nothing, it's that they've got good reason to be risk adverse as a whole, because if you screw something up, it could result in no toilet paper and paper towels on the shelves, right? At the extreme outside possibility of a global pandemic or something, and the supply chain gets messed up. But in a more closely held kind of concern, if a business tries for a big swing, right, and the big swing doesn't work out, there's a profile of company that can deal with that, right? Like the market as a whole, there's about 10% that can't afford to do anything. They can't afford to take any risks whatsoever and can't afford to move their technology forward at all. No budget, right? Then there's about 10% that could burn a warehouse down and it would have no impact on them. In fact, they make a habit of it to show how hard they're pushing on new technologies, right? But there's this whole middle market, this 80%, that have the money to move technology forward and they have the interest, but they can't afford to burn a warehouse down to do it. And so they have to make very calculated risks, these sort of incremental improvements. But a lot of the technology propositions out there still go in with sort of the same stakes. It's like, okay, you're just going to go in and hook up these technologies and with your system, but that has huge implications to an operation, right? You're going to have to upgrade your WMS, which is, where you're going to have to do a hard integration to the WMS. And that's like saying to a business, all it's going to take is open heart surgery. That's all, right? And until the stakes change, it's going to be the same conversation, right? That they're going to be risk adverse, because if you play around with the most expensive, most risky thing to touch in the whole enterprise to get that advancement, it's going to have to be way worth it. And they're going to have a lot of guarantees that it will work out, So I think what we tend to see in our market is any technology that can be taken in bite-sized chunks tends to win. It's the ones where the barriers to entry are low and the risks are low. And that tends to get adopted much more quickly. So in a lot of ways, it's like any other skill. Acquiring new technologies is a skill that businesses have to have. But it builds best in bite-sized chunks. So if you think of a business like going to the gym or something, you don't go in and lift 1,000 pounds right out the gate. You start incrementally and build incrementally into bigger and bigger weights, and your business can take on more weight the larger it gets, right? So I think that's still where the market is.
So still some resistance you're saying out there, and I don't disagree with that at all. I did stumble across a fantastic study on the StayLink website. I recommend you go there. It's a VDC StayLinked study.
Yeah.
If you see, Justin, it's phenomenal. It has really good information.
I'll drop
on
the
it.
link in the show notes.
But one of the things that it keys on is, when they talk, one of the questions was around investing in the WMS. So, right, a core technology for any warehouse out there. And the encouraging news the comb out that I saw here is that, and I'll just read it, reflected in the survey data, share of organizations with the most current WMS running or they're only a year or two behind increased significantly from 45% back in 2021 to 61% now. What does that mean? It means that most organizations that have a WMS are keeping up with the system, keeping it, making sure that it's current within the last couple years. Why is that relevant? Well, I think it gets to Justin's point in the fact that if you're going to start doing these incremental adds to the system, if you will, you need to have an upgraded WMS in order to do that.
Right.
And I think that comes through this information. The other key driver that I wanted to throw on the table here, which this study is fantastic. One of the things that's moving the most within the warehouse space is improving the perfect order rate. So that is, this idea of before it goes out the door, it has to be perfect. And we have talked a lot about over the last couple years, what's one thing that's kind of creeping up there? Returns. Right. You have this onslaught of return management now. So one of the ways to help mitigate that, I'm just making some extrapolations, and it's not bro science, I guess, but I'm just trying to make some extrapolations here that, if they want to start mitigating risk, well, one of the ways you do that is at the head end, make sure the order is right. So they're keeping their WMS up to speed and they're improving that perfect order rate. So I guess that kind of speaks into what you're saying here, Justin, right? I mean, in the sense that
totally.
Yeah, they're going to incrementally now go after how to become more efficient in their processes.
Yeah, so this is actually the second year we ran it. And you're absolutely right. The first year that we ran it, it was sort of a halfway point between 2021 and 2022. And we wanted to see these sort of year over year trends because there was this angle around the age of the WMS or the profile of the WMS. If it was homegrown, if it was a homegrown app, there was no next version coming next year that would have all the APIs that would let you hook up whatever new technology you wanted, right? So during COVID, it was all about speed. Everything was about speed. By 50%, it was speed.
And you see that in that survey. It was all about speed. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Right. But then the next year that we run that, it's like, okay, before it was just purely about getting boxes out the door. And the next year that we ran it, it was all about, okay, now we need the right boxes getting out the door. Okay, we survived, right? And I think one of the reasons that we saw people push toward these WMS upgrades and keeping more current or looking at moving to platforms that were more flexible and gave them more options was that when the time came where they needed the options, they didn't have them, right? And so when automation was the big conversation being had about, hey, we can't get people in the warehouse, or it's a risk to have too many people in the warehouse. So maybe we can backfill with bots. Well, hooking in bots is open heart surgery on the version that we've got today. But in this next version, there's more APIs, there's more options. And so that we saw this big push with the WMS vendors around these upgrades. But again, that's kind of a long tail thing. I think there was this awakening in the market to say, okay, well, the next 2 years are going to pass anyway. So if it's going to take that long to get on it, we need to get started now. And so we saw when people were doing these big technology tries, these big bet, big swing kind of attempts at technology, a lot of times they would fall apart at the proof of concept phase because the cost of getting a proof of concept up and running was almost the same as installing the full solution. Doing that open heart surgery was the same cost, whether you were doing it for one site or you were doing it for 10 sites. And so I think that was the most interesting revelation out of the study, was that, okay, it did prove out to be right, that the app was king. In the end, the technology was sort of secondary to what options were available to a customer to be able to implement these new technologies.
And I wonder, how can a VAR leverage that information? And it's brilliant information. I think the study is one of the better ones I've read in a long, long time. But when you look at it specifically on that, 44% of companies completely or strongly agree that the complexity of piloting or evaluating new technologies limits the number of solutions they can fully test. That's exactly what Justin just said. Mm-hmm. That, right. Hey, so I wonder, now I put my VAR hat back on, Justin, and it's like, okay, so if I'm a reseller and I go through the piloting phase of a particular efficiency augmentation with one of my customers, now I'm thinking to myself, well, dang, I got to leverage that quickly and try to scale that with my other customers as fast as possible and mitigate their anxiety over piloting and evaluating, in the sense that, well, it's the Oracle model, I guess, right? Well, we had this person build it, and now we're going to go out and replicate it
where we need to,
yeah, to our other customers, right? Is that part of the takeaway here? Is that
Well, so there's seasons, right? There's seasons in technology where we kind of go through these cycles of, when the economy's good and everybody's doing great, and there's these great new technologies out, and they have the attention of the world, and so a lot of the money goes through that, and whether it's RFID or RFID again, or
no, it's the year of RFID. He didn't hear. It's the year of RFID.
Yeah, we've officially decided on this podcast. It's the RFID year now.
Yeah, it's RFID. Yeah. It's definitely, that's the hot one.
That's the
yeah. But there's seasons for the big bet and the big swing, and so a VAR has to be able to have that conversation with a customer, because you want to stay relevant to their technology strategy, to a customer's technology ambitions. You don't want to be seen as kind of the naysayer of those technologies. Like I specialize in one of the oldest computing technologies still in use in the world. Right?
Proudly, yes.
Proudly, totally. No, I mean, it turns 55 this year, that tech. So, but it still runs somewhere between 60 and 70% of the warehouses in the world. Right. And so it's necessary, but I can tell you what I've learned is that it's not a good idea to stand in the way of people's technology ambitions. It's to be in support of them, help enable them where you can, and let them try, and that you're better off and better serving the customer by doing that, but be prepared to give them the incremental options, and that, yes, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you could have an upgraded WMS and an automation deployment that will be 500% more efficient, right? And in the meantime, here is the 15% improvement we can get in your accuracy rate with 2D barcodes. Or here's the 20% more efficiency we can get by upgrading your devices to a new form factor and stuff. So collect on that too while you're doing that. And I think that's probably the sweet spot for a lot of VARs, especially if they don't have the infrastructure or the business practice to compete on the larger technology strategies. If you can't or aren't invited to the table to discuss the WMS side of things, or the automation side of things, or the AI side of things, you can definitely make a huge impact in how their business operates today. And largely speaking, most of the time, that's the stuff that wins the day. The fundamentals win championships kind of model, right? So I think that's where VARs win the most. Show the incremental value.
Well, what were you going to ask?
I was just going to say, and to close on that a little bit, coming out in the survey, I hate to keep referring back to it, but such a darn good survey.
You're hyping this up here, yeah.
I know, right? I totally threw you a curveball. Sorry about that. But anyway, some of the environments remain consistent that resellers are accustomed to. So, like implementing new technologies, training of the workforce, and integration complexity. Those are the top two barriers that a company will see to implementing that. And we chat about this. I'm going to hone hone in on the training of the workforce. I mean, I see that as the role of the reseller. You have to have a good strategy to not only implement the technology advancement, but train on the technology advancement so that you can adequately mitigate that barrier. I mean, it is the number one barrier that your customer across the table from you is like, this sounds great, but gosh darn, now I got to train everybody on, how am I going to do that? You got to nip that in the bud, right? You got to
do the whole
address
like,
it.
here, I'm selling this to you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, right.
No. Especially
I'm out.
if you want them to buy it.
I'm out.
Exactly. If you want them to buy into this and do this, you're going to have to stick around and say, hey, not only am I going to sell this to you, not only am I going to help you install it, but I'm going to be here to help implement, to help train, to get onboarded.
I think the channel is. I think they've consumed that. Though.
I think so.
Honestly, that's where a lot of the partners want to be now. Is kind of.
I would hope so. Yeah.
That's part of like managed service. Is that what you're just?
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
there it is. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But make mobility, make your data collection strategy, your efficiency strategy, our problem. Right. And so they want to be the ongoing kind of advisor, or trainer, or manager of those issues. I think that's how they've sort of found their niche going forward.
Well, Justin, you mentioned the AI of it all, and obviously we can't, like I said, we can't have a conversation.
Did he mention it first, not us?
I think he did.
Good.
It's because again, he's helping me out with the segues here. Yeah. So back when again, this is one of those topics that you were ahead of the game a few years back when we had our first conversation. You were talking about AI, to help improve analytics, to make better sense of whatever data is being collected in the supply chain or in a warehouse, improving processes. Now, obviously, AI has become this big talking point that everyone in every industry is trying to figure out, like, hey, what can it do for me? What can it do for my business? How can it make things better, faster, more efficient? So what's happening for you then when you're going out and having conversations with folks in the supply chain? Are they asking you a lot of questions about how can AI become part of their technology? How can it become part of their processes? What are they expecting to get out of it that could actually be something where there's opportunities for us?
Well, so AI is a big topic, right? And it's a tool. And it's more like a material. So it's kind of like it's difficult to get excited about. There's a lot of hype around AI. And I've talked about it before in years past and said AI is kind of like a solution in search of a problem. And in some cases that's still true. You can't go to an AI and say, how can you improve my life, or how can you improve my operation or something yet, right? Where they because it takes a lot of data to do that. So, again, it all of this stuff sort of goes through cycles. So it's more like aluminum, like if everybody was out shouting about the advances in aluminum, most people don't know how that's going to impact their lives until you say, imagine being able to get a soda that's as fresh as the soda fountain in your home whenever you want or something. And it's stored in this aluminum can, or we're going to make cars vastly lighter by building them with aluminum, and you'll get better gas mileage. There's a benefit gap right now. If you could, so right now AI is kind of in the cycle where it's like, okay, if you're writing a long marketing document, or you need a talking points for a podcast or something, you can go to ChatGPT, and now there's a use case that people can kind of consume a bit. I think in our market, AI has already seen a lot of use cases, particularly in demand prediction kind of stuff, or optimization stuff. It's actually in use a great deal. But I think we're a ways away from it being in very practical uses in the warehouse in particular, because again, it's one of these tools that it might tack on to a workflow or something. But I think when people think of AI, they think of robots doing the jobs of humans, and sort of these humanoid kind of things walking around a warehouse. There'd be a lot of AI to get that done. But I think it's just we're still a ways out. And I think where we are in AI is that people are beginning to consume that it takes a lot of data to make AI work. And we're in the data ownership phase of AI. So if you watch any of the news cycles, you saw that OpenAI and ChatGPT sourced a lot of their data from the open internet. And then like companies realized, hold on, hang on, that was our data that you trained that on. Like it's quoting something from our website that all your data belong to us, kind of thing. And I think that's where we're going to see some very interesting conversations in our industry. As a Fortune 500 company going to want their data, one, stored outside of their company to train an AI to improve potentially their competition, kind of thing. And so I think that's sort of where we are in this. It's not sort of the Wild West anymore for AI companies. They actually do have to account for where the data came from, where it's being stored, how it's being used, what are the guarantees, what are the security concerns of that. It's starting to grow up a little bit. And I think that's important for every technology, that it hits a phase where, okay, we got to start having the conversations of what happens if it goes wrong, right? Like what happens with delivery drones if they crash, in the middle of a park or something, right? We have to let the technology grow up a little more and go through the outside possibilities, even if they're remote. Who's accountable for that? And I think that's where AI is right now.
I think that's a very really fair assessment. I often think about it. Well, what can a warehouse do today that they couldn't do 10 years ago with some of the AI that's in place? And I think, Justin, it sounds like what you're saying, and I don't disagree. It's maybe on the decision making that's not really in the warehouse. It's demand side, right? It's predicting demand, getting smarter about what's in the warehouse type of a thing, and supply and those types of things. But there's two areas I kind of wanted to riff with you on. Number one is machine vision. And maybe this is one of those areas of AI that maybe is going to get a little bit of a run here in the next, 2 to 5 years, in the sense that, we're starting to see solutions around health and safety of using machine vision and AI to look at, how forklift operators are doing and things of that nature, and sensing, I don't want to seem like the overlord here, but, bad behavior or something along those
better
lines.
ways to be more efficient.
Better ways to be more efficient and stuff like that.
Behavior.
So are you seeing it there, Justin? Do you see, I'm intrigued by the machine vision part of it, right? Like, that's a light AI lift in the sense that, you just see these applications out there already. I think there might be some run there. What do you think?
Totally. Yeah. I think the issue is it goes through the same barrier that sort of all these other technologies have to go through. Machine vision is a great technology. You have to train it, you have to build it, you have to tell it what to look for. But once you've built it, then you have to feed that back into something. Right. And that's usually where the actual lift is. And what you'll find in a lot of these technologies is that sometimes just the cost of integrating those technologies into the back end system costs more than the actual hardware and the deployment of the physical hardware. So that's one of the drags against machine vision. It's the same drag that every technology goes through if it's a standalone system, which many of the machine vision solutions are, is that they are built to do a particular thing, quality checks or something like that, or safety concerns like you're talking about. Those use cases. Okay, the camera sees it. You've trained it to identify when it's right and when it's wrong, and when it's wrong, report that back to that bit where it communicates back to the business. That's the real lift. In most things, in most technologies, that's where the real lift is. So there's always going to be these notable use cases for all these technologies. But in the aggregate, is it going to be deployable at speed? I use this measure of saying, if 100 customers needed it tomorrow, could you scale to address that demand? And no. Generally, the technology lift is
too heavy.
Big. Where,
too heavy, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if generally for like a lot of automation companies, if 10 customers a year deployed the tech, that they had a great year. If a WMS company deploys 50 new customers a year, they had a great year. And so I think sometimes we get a little, like, we see a lot of the wins and announcements and stuff, and we tend to think like, oh, it's taken over the world. But that generally isn't the case. The scale for the total number of customers is actually not as big as it seems.
I appreciated your analogy earlier about the idea of technology needing to grow up in order to get where we need to go. We were just before the pod talking about kids, and I think it's kind of like raising a kid in a way where there's a lot of outcomes that your kid can have if you're not teaching them properly.
This is true.
If you're not, or also the method of teaching can make a big difference too. And I was just thinking last night I was trying to show my son how to tie shoes, and it was a maddening exercise.
Hey, we've all been there
because I'm sitting there like, welcome
to the circle.
I can show you. I can literally be showing you how to do it.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me like, I don't get it, Daddy. And I'm just like, it's almost the same thing to me with AI. It's like, this idea of we can feed all this information, we can show it, but if we're not helping it make the practical connections between what we're showing it and what we want to get out of it, you're not gonna. It's either never going to get there, or it's going to get there in the wrong way from what we want to accomplish. And I think that's kind of where this conversation is with AI, not just in warehousing, but everywhere right now. Of hey, we can give you all the data in the world. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to go out and do what we want you to do, or what a human being can necessarily do at this point, if we're not figuring out what all the steps are in between and showing you the process in between. I'm sure some things are a very simple, like here's X, you do X. All right, fine, I can do that. But I think with what we're talking about, outside of just, basic, data consumption, or maybe in sorting it out, like I agree. I think maybe we're a long ways from here's AI, it's going to solve all your problems and do everything that needs to be done.
Right, it's just the panacea to everything.
Exactly.
Right. But it's not going to go lift a box, right? It has to talk to something to go lift a box, right? And I remember seeing this poster after ChatGPT came out in sort of peak hype for ChatGPT, and a construction company, I forget which one, put up a billboard and said, "Hey, ChatGPT, build this building." And it's like it's not going to do that bit. And I think it's one of the important lessons we learned during COVID was for all of the technologies that were available, for all the RFID and the beacons and the sensors and the robots and the drones and machine vision and AI and all of that. If you couldn't get people in the warehouse, you were not working. You were not operational. And humans are incredibly versatile. They really don't get enough credit when it comes to technology, and that we're all trying to push more and more and ever closer to the simplest human version of this job, right? And so they can do things like problem solve on the fly, where if a box has fallen off of a pallet or something, it can say, "Oh, well, that fell off this pallet." The person can reason that that's where that box came from. Where computers, you have to tell it to do that. You have to teach it to do that. And there are so many exceptions and scenarios where you need a lot of training, you need a lot of data, you need a lot of history for it to make sense of that. If you think about like self-driving cars, there were a lot of self-driving cars that they would announce like, hey, we've put on, a million miles or something of self-driving teaching, right? And that sounds like a lot. But if you divide that by the number of cars in LA, you're talking about a couple minutes of LA traffic that you've taught it on. So you have that number of scenarios that you've taught it on, right? So again, it's sort of these economies of scale. It's going to be a number of years before you have enough people who've adopted an AI and a robotics deployment or a machine vision solution where it can intuit what you want, because it's seen enough examples or it's reasoned enough examples that this is the most efficient way to get this done.
No, it's fair. I was listening to a podcast, and your example of the construction company is a brilliant one. Build this ChatGPT.
Right.
This is part of this falls in the camp of the AI is not going to ruin the world tomorrow kind of thing.
Right.
And they went through the exercise of, well, okay, just imagine that you tell a robot to get from New York to Paris, and just a simple instruction.
Right.
The complexity of that we are so far away from,
Yeah.
okay, not just, maybe the AI could stumble on Delta's website and buy a ticket, but now it physically has to get from wherever it is, assuming it's a robot, into a cab, over to the airport, and then you can break all that down. Well, okay, now in order to do that, here's all the incremental steps that it's just, when you think about it, it's like, no, we're nowhere near any of that.
We're still a little bit of a better machine than
we're
the
a lot better.
point,
Yes. But anyway,
it will develop fast.
It will.
I don't want to take
will.
anything
For
away
sure.
from that.
For sure.
You're seeing all of these advancements, and it's blowing people's minds about, like an AI generated video. And I think we're approaching a point where you definitely have to ask, okay, is this AI generated or not? I think those are kind of the advancements that we're seeing, but we're a long ways away from a generalized, where it's just better at everything.
No, I agree. Well, as marketers, we're a little bit up in the bit because, you can go to, that's where ChatGPT had the most impact. It's like, as an LLM, it's like, I can just ask it to, write me a script for this podcast.
But guess what? We still have our jobs.
It's
been like, it's been a year now, and we're all still working, it didn't replace us,
But it's going to have its impact in some areas.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But anyway,
Well, it's a useful narrative, right? It is functionally a useful narrative, and I think I keep this list of articles that I read that are kind of, they follow the hype cycle and things that sort of aged like milk, right? Where somebody makes a statement about technology and then it doesn't pan out, sort of thing. So one of them was IBM saying it doesn't see a number of layoffs happening due to AI, that you'll see more people being hired because of AI. And I think what we were seeing is that in the same way COVID, there was sort of this massive expansion, and then there was sort of this correction. And the narrative around that was because of COVID. And a lot of businesses use that. Right now, there's a lot of businesses using AI as a narrative for trimming down and getting more profitable, letting go of people that they want to, and it's a useful narrative for that. But I think it builds a sort of hype around AI that isn't really based in reality. It's not necessarily that all these people were being replaced because there was an AI to back up that job. It was useful, right? So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I get you. All right. Well, we've touched on a few emerging technologies, and you've kind of mentioned a little bit here and there about where they do and don't fit into all this conversation. As we said earlier, we've decided this is officially the RFID year.
Yes, this is the year of RFID.
It's going to be it.
This is it.
And in part because we did a survey, an end user survey a year or two back, where I guess it was last year actually, where we actually reached out to a lot of supply chain professionals, got over 100 plus responses, and we're asking them like, hey, is RFID part of your business? And I think almost all of them, I think all but one, responded that they were routinely using RFID on a daily basis. But, beyond that, I just wanted to get your insight, again, because I feel like you're always on kind of the forefront of what's happening in technology in the warehouse and the supply chain. Where are we with the next step emerging technologies? Are you hearing, are a lot of folks talking about RFID, robotics, augmented reality? We're talking about the Vision Pro and its potential use or not use in the warehouses yet. Cloud, machine vision, all this kind of stuff. What are people talking about? What is the kind of stuff that we're not necessarily talking about yet, do you think is going to start emerging in the warehouse space?
Yeah. So, I was talking about there's seasons of technology. And so we're in one of those seasons where the big bet, the big swing, the bleeding edge technology had some time with the spotlight. And we're kind of what you were seeing in the survey, I think, is that people were saying, okay, we don't necessarily need to buy a whole new system. Maybe we get to chopping down more trees if we just sharpen our axe a bit, right? And so I think that's what we're seeing in the market now, is that they're focused on where a lot of the technology play was, here's the 1,000% more efficiency you can have 3 years from now. Again, we're in that sort of incremental phase of technology adoption where they're saying, okay, what's the 20% I can have 3 months from now, and let that build to I'll do 10 of those projects and I'll get my 200% that way, right? So RFID is one of those. In my opinion, that's why RFID is sort of making a resurgence for that. Is it's grown up a lot, over the last decade from the time when it was going to completely replace the barcode. To where it is now. There's a lot more ready-made RFID solutions where if you talk to people even a couple years ago, they had an RFID department and they would have deployments, but for the most part, they would get hired by companies as part of a science project to say, how can we use RFID, more effectively? Or there was a big push in retail or something for RFID use cases and stuff. So more in the supply chain side of things, we're seeing more penetration in that, but that suffers the same problem. It suffers the same issue that sort of all of these technologies do, and that the speed of adoption is always going to be dragged on by the speed of integration. How fast can a technology be adopted and put in use? And I also sort of use this model called the barrier of viability. Right? Can I do the same job as good or better than what I'm using today? If so, let's budget. Let's do it. So if it's a new device, if it's a new technology, if it's a new software or something, that's the barrier of viability, right? So I think the technology that probably is going to get the next round is data, because I think that's what people have found is sort of the underlying technology that feeds all of their other technology options. Is how can they see more about what's happening today, right? How can I tell whether a new technology made a difference or not? How could I tell if robots improved if I can't tell you how good my accuracy rate is today? How would I know? So I think they've found that that's the underpinning to a lot of these technologies, and that you need a locationing system put in. If you want to know where your goods are, you want to know where your people are, you need a locationing system. That boils down to data, right? I want to feed AI, so I need a WMS system that can give me the data that I can feed to an AI to let it optimize, kind of thing. That boils down to data. So I think data is going to see another round, I think, of being the big talk. You'll see a lot more talk of software and a lot more talk about insights and all of that. In addition to RFID, that'll be the very practical kind of application that like VARs can be focused on and deploying, but we're going to need to start having a conversation about data too.
Justin Griffith says data.
Data, yes.
Maybe, hopefully, this isn't one of those things that you go back and go like, "Oh man, I took the big swing."
Like,
and was completely wrong.
It's the season of data. To use the season
of
now,
data,
it's the
that's
season of data, which, by the way, comes through in the survey again. Going back to your locationing systems, when this data shows that I think it's let me do the quick calculation here. Well, only 3%. So 97% of locations will either have in use or evaluate or plan to use by 2027 some kind of locationing system. So right, and that, to his point, that feeds the data. That's feeding where are things. That answering some of these basic questions found building blocks, if you will, of building on top of that more sophisticated systems. Another one that kind of came out of it, and you touched on it, would be robotics. And obviously, this is very interesting to BlueStar. We're developing a robotics play, but when you look at again the survey here, just roughly, just using numbers, about 80% of warehouses are either in use, currently evaluating, or plan to use by 2027 some kind of goods to person AMRs, which is what we implement, where robots are bringing goods to the pickers, if you will. Yeah, bringing stuff to you. So, but there's a lot more if you break into those numbers. Around 60% of those are evaluating. So there's a lot of eval going on in the robotics space, whereas
a lot of we're thinking about it.
A lot of we're thinking about it type of a thing. Justin, I wanted to get your take on this because another thing I saw in there was an increase in two areas. RFID, yes, did see a dramatic increase from 2 years ago to today. There's a lot of interest in that. Wearables, number one, and number two, beacons and sensors. So I think we talked a little bit about where, I don't know, what is your comment on maybe those two categories? Are you seeing more demand for wearables? And here I'm getting like scanners and okay, yeah, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of those incremental kind of enhancements that you can make to an environment that it's a low cost, low barrier to entry. There's a easy barrier of viability there, and the definition of wearable is pretty broad. And so you can do things like that. That could be anything from a wearable computer to a wearable peripheral kind of thing. And so we're seeing a lot of interest uh, for that. There's manufacturers coming out with standalone wearable Android computer ring scanners, or hand scanners, and I think again, what that's kind of growing up a little bit too. The ease of implementation of those and the software ecosystem to run applications on those is beginning to mature, I think. So and even just the native form factor, having a wearable computer versus carrying one, there's more options on the market now. It was one of those segments. It's like vehicle mounts. There was a segment for wearables and vehicle mounts in particular where it was all about the handheld. It was all about the conversion from pistol grip to PDA style or keyboarded device to a touchscreen device. And wearables didn't get a ton of attention from the market for a time. And it's definitely getting it now. We're seeing that from the major manufacturers. And again, a little broader selection of what wearable means and a little more focus on competing with some of the people who've really emerged as market leaders for peripherals in particular. Um, so yeah, wearables will definitely see a lot of action. That's something that's a very easy lift for a lot of the VAR community. I think it's right up their typical skill set. Beacons and sensors. This was one of the perks of doing Android. For a while, the narrative about moving to Android was all about the downsides, right? It was all stick, no carrot kind of thing, and that Windows is dying, and so you have to move to Android. And there was no upside for that other than you got to move. And yeah, I think actually even there was a BlueStar survey that talked about that isn't a mover. That's not a narrative that especially in an industry that is world famous for sweating its assets. Um, just because you have to does not mean you're going
to.
to.
Yes,
right?
for so sure.
So,
Digging their heels
yeah,
like, nope,
yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or are they going to shut down when Windows stops being supported? Are they going to shut down? No. Okay. Then,
Right.
Come back later.
Still run.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So what I think the industry was waiting for is a good reason to move to Android. And I think it was your guys' survey that was talking about that the Android migration is not as far along as people perceive. That it was something like 100% of people in the survey came back and said they were still running Windows devices, and that eight yeah, in some way or form, and that 80% of them said it was the majority of their devices. And I think so that's one of those incremental changes. You can go in and now say, hey, we've got Android devices, and here's a ton of reasons why you should move to Android now. The technology options that it offers you are really where it's at now. And this is definitely the season where people want options. And in a lot of ways they always do. Like it's always a winning message to walk into a customer and say, I'm going to sell you a platform that will let you do beacons and sensors and peripherals today and robotics tomorrow, right? That you haven't painting yourself into a technology corner by that. Or, this one supports 5G connectivity and Wi-Fi. And so you can have a hybrid environment, right? Those walking in with something that enables options is kind of always a winning message. So beacons and sensors, I think, again, there's a lot of use cases now where, we've played around with use cases for that, like being able to notify people based on their location according to a beacon, whether they're putting a box on the wrong dock or not, or they're walking through the wrong dock door with a box. And again, that's sort of back to that accuracy thing. We're seeing a lot more focus on these technologies and how they relate to accuracy. How can you tell the worker on the floor that the order is wrong or something is amiss with the workflow. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the use case now.
Fascinating. Good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, no doubt.
Good input.
All right. Well, hey, we'll wrap up in a moment by letting Justin tell us a little bit more about how StayLinked is going to help you go out there and
I bet
get
you
some
they
of this
can.
business and how they fit into
I'm
this.
just guessing they can.
I feel pretty confident.
I don't know. We might be able to do something. Yeah.
We'll see. But as always, first I want to thank all of our sponsors here on the TEConnect podcast and the sponsors of our TEConnect program. As always, if you like what you're watching, hearing right now, tell us about it. Like our show, subscribe, leave comments, share it with a friend or colleague that you think would like to listen. We'd love to hear from them. And of course, as always, if you want to reach out to us at any time, you can always do that. There's always a link in the show notes where you can drop ideas to us. You can also reach out to us anytime on social media or email us directly, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap up first of all with a little VAR value here.
Yes.
And Justin, like I mentioned, I want you to talk a little bit more about StayLinked. How are you guys fitting into all this stuff we've been talking about today and shoving things forward and getting folks maybe those little incremental points where they need to move? And how are you helping VARs go out there and strengthen their warehouse and supply chain solutions?
Yeah, so StayLinked provides terminal emulation software, and we have kind of a unique approach to it. Where we got the name was we solve a very practical problem with connectivity in the warehouse. And we actually just did a survey of a number of customers in the logistics space, and it came back that like 80% of them have this very practical issue of connectivity in the warehouse when using a terminal emulation software. So terminal emulation represents about 2/3 of the use case for all data collection devices in the warehouse, in the supply chain kind of use case. So you could imagine this is happening multiple times a day to users in a warehouse, where they will have any sort of interruption to their connection, whether it's a Wi-Fi or network issue, or battery runs dry, or device reboots, or even something as simple as a device falling asleep to save battery life in some cases can cause this connectivity issue. That's what StayLinkt solves. Just installing the software, we keep that session live. They pick up right where they left off. Even in extreme scenarios where a device cold boots and resets itself back to factory settings, we can reinstall and pick up where the user left off. I think where we help people now in the future use cases is the architecture that we use to solve that issue is also a great platform for taking the first couple of steps toward any of these new technologies. So we provide this great platform for being able to integrate things like robotics and things like heads-up display and peripherals and beacons and sensors and RFID. The platform that we use to solve this very practical problem now can also be used and leveraged to implement all of these technologies that customers are very interested in trying. And it provides a very low risk mechanism for doing that because we can do it without changing anything at the WMS side. So, try robots, but no open heart surgery. Try Bluetooth peripherals, try beacons, try sensors without the open heart surgery, and get some buy-in, see some results, see some benefit for that. And then you can take on bigger and bigger chunks of that. And maybe you get to the point where you say, I want the most efficient, the most integrated version of this. But if not, you're collecting on what the technology can give you in the meantime. So I think that's really the value we provide to the VARs is we give them a mechanism for relevance in those conversations. We provide a channel for them to integrate these new technologies that their customers are very anxious to try without it being a big costly science project. We can give them a simple foot in the door for having conversations for a lot of these technologies. And that's the real value. Beyond the very practical solution we solve for people, it also gives them options.
Brilliant. That's what it's all about, giving the reseller some options here on a platform that would enable such growth for their customers. Good stuff. Good stuff.
It's the kind of partner you want to have on your side when you're going out there trying to win some business and grow some business out there. All right. Well, and of course, check the show notes because I'll have links to some of these surveys you're talking about, to all the things. If you haven't figured out by now, Justin and his team know what their stuff.
They know their stuff.
They're pretty tech savvy. They're pretty much on the front edge of all this stuff. So
absolutely.
That's like I said, the kind of partner you want to have on your side. Let's wrap up as always with what's TEConnecting with you.
Oh, yes.
Where we get to talk about something in the world of tech, business, science, innovation.
Or otherwise, yes.
Yeah, just something that's got our attention we feel like chatting about today.
Fair enough.
Again, Justin, I know you have your finger on the pulse of all things technology. So what's TEConnecting with you right now?
I had this whole thing about micro OLED displays and how they play, because I had the Apple Vision Pro, right? And what's funny about the Apple Vision Pro is you put it on and the fidelity with which you see the outside world is pretty great. For the headsets that are out there, it's pretty great. But you go to look at something close and your vision starts to get blurry. It's like you have 20/50 vision. And so, there's all these great micro OLED displays. And so I had this whole talk about that. But today, 3M just announced a brand new material that is that's very exciting for the world of packing and shipping. It's paper bubble wrap.
Okay.
Interesting.
Paper bubble wrap. I like it.
Paper bubble wrap. It's fully recyclable.
Nice.
At the curb, recyclable, but it does pop. This is the
I gotta see
still get the
this.
tactile
for
part
the
of it.
environment, and great for shipping and packing. It's also a great sensory toy kind of thing. But yeah, I think this is one of the exciting things. We were talking about sharpening the axe a bit, and that this is sort of the season where people are sharpening their deployments and sharpening their accuracy and all that. I think this speaks to one of the other big trends in that sustainability. A lot more companies are messaging how they're being accountable for sustainability and what sort of impact and strides they're making in that. So this technology coming out, it's meant to be fed through automated packing machines, and so I think it feeds a lot of different plays for companies that are fighting for ways to be more sustainable in kind of a creative way,
Really nice. I'll
That's
be
awesome.
darned.
There you go.
I can't wait to see that
Paper
one.
bubble wrap.
I like it. I like it.
Bubble
Yes.
wrap.
So it can't be bubble wrap though if it doesn't have the tactile part of it there still.
Well, no,
Right.
and it's still got to make that noise because it is the ongoing joke at our house. Whenever we get an Amazon, box or whatever, somebody sneaks the little bubble wrap out and then pops it behind somebody or whatever to scare you.
Right. But you don't get a lot of that as much anymore because it is usually like the paper filling more. So there you go. I like it.
Just got a little bit of the yesterday. Anyway.
All right, Dean, what's TEConnecting with you?
I got two numbers that are TEConnecting with me.
Okay.
920 million and 2,644.
Okay.
So I'll explain the first one.
Those numbers.
920 million is it was the agreement reached between ESPN and the NCAA for television rights. 8-year contract, $115 million annually. ESPN is now going to continue the 45-year tradition of doing some 40-odd NCAA championships, like 21 different women's, 19 different men's events, like you're all aware of, and that's why I brought it up, with the NCAA tournament.
March Madness.
In March Madness right now. Well, they have exclusive rights to that on the women's side, not the men's side. But women's volleyball, gymnastics, softball, men's FCS football, etc.
Yeah.
115 million. That's just a lot of money that goes. That's just the video. That's just the production of the TV.
Right.
And I don't know, kind of coming out of that world, I'm always shocked to see these big deals. And then you think 10 years from now, are we all going to still watch ESPN? I mean, we're going to watch sports for sure, but I mean, it's like these long haul bets. It's like, this is an 8-year contract, but still, it's like, man.
Well, I don't know because you've got this thing now where everyone's backing away from the streaming and heading back to potentially cable and some of these other services.
So you're good. You're good with this contract. You think
I'm not saying
I think
it's. Well, I mean, yes, I think there's a potential for it there. And ESPN, they've got their own streaming thing now too.
That's fair.
So
That's fair. All right.
They're packaged up with like Disney and Hulu and stuff. So.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
So 2,644, by the way, if you're wondering what that number is all about, that's the number of objects that have been launched into space last year.
In 1 year.
In 1 year, 2,644. I think, Justin, do you have a little model rocket out the back and you're launching stuff?
Yeah.
Up?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's my 3D printer.
It's getting to the space. If you look at the statistics, That is up. In 2019, there were just 564 objects that went into space. If you go back just even a little bit farther than that, like 2011, only 129 objects went into space. So when you look at it, it is the definition of a hockey stick. It's like
we're talking about objects that are going up and staying in space.
Yeah,
mostly.
Yes, primarily.
I mean,
Absolutely.
Typically,
yes. Now, of course, America is the biggest offender. Of the 2,664, we sent up 2,166.
Wow.
I think most of that is Elon, right? Whatever he's doing,
just shooting a rocket off every
sending
other
stuff
day,
up there randomly.
Starlink,
But you'll never guess who number 2 is.
I mean, not NASA,
Just
I assume.
real quick. No, these are countries. So it's based out of like what country?
Countries.
India. India is way down on the list.
Really?
They only did 6. The United Kingdom, I'll answer it for you.
Really?
Yeah, the UK sent up 144, besting China, which came in at 128 in number 3, and then you got Russia, Japan, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Long tails out. But clearly the US is still sending up a lot of the junk that's going on into space.
We are.
Yeah.
I gotta feel like at this point, if you just go flying up into space, it's like driving through like the big cloud of bugs that randomly show up on the highway.
Absolutely.
You know?
But when you're sending up 2,000, what's the quick math there? That's like 4 a day coming out of the U.S., just back of the envelope, not, it's like, man, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think Justin's to blame. Clearly, it's
I'm part of the problem. Yeah. Well, it's funny. We can see the Starlink launches from our office.
Oh, nice.
Do you see them a lot? Do they happen a lot?
Yeah, they do.
So
There's a
there you go.
fair amount.
There you go.
Yeah, because they fly out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, and so it's pretty wild to watch. Too.
It was freaking people out on social initially, but now everybody I think has kind of gotten used to it.
Right.
Like, it's a UFO. No, it's not a UFO. It's just a long contrail from one of these things. Anyway, what's TEConnecting with you?
So there's always this talk about disconnecting from the internet and social media and the
There's
technology.
A lot of talk about that.
That can seem apparently celebrities have sort of figured this out a bit, or at least are a little more cognizant of it.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting article I came across in The Verge talking about how celebrities are trying to minimize who can reach them and how, which makes sense. You're a celebrity and everybody in the world wants a piece of you.
Yes.
So, you can't just have a device where anyone can just call you, text you, email you, hit you up on social media all the time, and everyone's trying to. So apparently a lot of celebrities have basically started eschewing the cellular device, like the phone, at least, in particular, the smartphone, and just not having them at all in their lives, or making it something that they are very rarely engaging with and are keeping away from them. So a lot of them apparently will use tablets, or if they are going to use a smartphone, make sure it's Wi-Fi only, so there's no cellular connection to it. They don't pay for a cellular plan to connect to it. Again, with the idea of minimizing the number of people that can reach them, where it can only be like people in their particular circle, like their agencies, their managers and all this stuff. Now, granted, this is, of course, the big caveat that when you're a superstar celebrity, you have people that can take care of a lot
of publicists.
I have people for that sort of thing.
Exactly.
You have someone who can take the phone calls.
Let the minions take care of that.
And manage all the people that want a piece of your time and attention or whatever.
I forget who the celebrity was that they just have a fax number. They don't have an agent. They just have a fax number, and you're going to fax your proposal to them. That's the only way you can reach them.
There's a lot of folks that apparently doing. Like, I know, like Christopher Nolan, they mentioned the director, like he apparently famously hates email.
Okay.
He's like, you call me and you call through my people if you want to get to me in order to get to me.
And that's how you contact.
You can't email.
So they're kind of off the grid. They're selectively off the grid
a little bit off the grid. And it's one of those things I'm like, in practicality, it sounds like a smart idea. But again, most of us can't do that because we need to be
on the grid,
the grid in some way. Because like Dean, if I just said, "Hey, I'm just going to be off the grid from now on," you can reach out to me whenever.
Fax me whenever you want to do the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
My company would be so mad.
Or there's, or like today when you're messaging me while you're in the middle of a meeting, you ask me for info. I'm like, no, you're just gonna have to send me a letter. Write out a letter, put it in the mail, and I'll get back to you when I get it.
Just smoke signals. That's the only way to get me.
So maybe we all can't be like these superstar celebrities, unfortunately.
As usual,
and
yes, we can't live the lives they do.
Or go back to the T9 phone or whatever and stay as far off the grid as possible. But we'll do what we can. So. That is what's TEConnecting with us today. Justin Griffith with StayLinked's.
Thanks,
Thank you
Justin.
so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you back on the show. So until next time, we got to unplug, but go out and help your tech grow up.
Yep.
Watch a movie on the moon.
There you go.
Just don't launch something into space.
Don't launch it. Yeah. Too much junk up there.
Launching projectors and and seats and everything out there. Too much stuff out there. And as always, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect podcast is brought to you by ELO and the 70 series Full HD professional grade touch monitors. I love that.
Man, that was a lot.
It feels so
That was
powerful.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah, like
heavy and powerful. Like, yes.
The 70 series delivers professional grade, feature rich platforms well suited for POS, interactive digital signage, self-service, document signing, and so much more. All right, Dean, let's get into some features here.
Yes, please. Let's do it.
We love our features.
We love the features.
Narrow border touchscreen.
All right.
You don't want to have that too much of a border.
It's got to look sexy.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
you can't have the Bush League big
type
borders.
stuff. Yeah. Energy Star 8.0 certified.
Mandatory. Got to have that.
Environmentally conscious
Yep.
there. Scratch resistant surface.
Now, see, there's a differentiator. Right? Yeah.
Durable IK07 design. Low blue light and flicker free. Because, you want to be able to see these things in any kind of lighting.
Absolutely.
Touch on-screen display tilt from 20 to 70 degrees, built-in speakers, which, sometimes that can be a difficult thing on display to get some good speakers.
For sure. Yeah.
And a collapsible stand for Visa mounting. They got all the features.
Oh, there you go.
Available now in 22, 24, and now 27-inch sizes in black or white housings. The 70 series delivers the quality and reliability that you expect from ELO, backed with a standard 3-year warranty extendable to 5 years with optional advanced unit replacement.
They stand by it, and that 27-inch is beautiful.
Oh, yeah?
Nice, yes. The older I get, I need screens to be bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I understand. Yeah, it's either that or I'm blowing everything up bigger on it myself.
That's right, yeah.
Check out the link in the show notes to learn more about these new monitors.